Welcome to Making Sense with Steve. Right about now, you're probably thinking to yourself, he's totally lost it and gone over the edge. But if you stay with me, I believe you'll see how all of this ties together. For those of you that are familiar with the common groups that are out there, you'll notice that I left PUAs off of the list, and PUA stands for pickup artists. PUAs basically are just opportunists, and they are going after whatever they can get, regardless of how the rules change or anything else. And what they're after is sleeping with women. They don't really fit into this conversation much, other than they are part of it, but a very small part. MGTOW. MGTOW stands for Men Going Their Own Way. These are men, and if I was to put a label on myself, I'd consider myself MGTOW. These are men that have just checked out of the game. They're not going to play. The deck's stacked, and there's no way we can possibly win, so we're out. The government and the U.S. Constitution, I am assuming you are familiar with what those two terms mean. MRAs. MRAs are men's rights activists. These are men who are actively seeking to change the laws in the country to make them equal. They're probably the most in touch out of everybody involved in this, with the exception of possibly the government. And then you have the feminists. The feminists are about special rights for women at the expense of men. And it doesn't matter what a feminist tells you, oh, they're not all that way. Well, yes, they are. It all started that way, all the way back at suffrage. A little bit of homework into the suffrage movement easily points that out. It's always been about at the expense of men. Women wanting men under their feet. Okay, now we have a basic understanding of what's involved here. The government, as I've said before, this started back at the Civil War. Now, what happened in the Civil War? There were a lot of things that happened, but one of the things that happened during the Civil War was it was basically the first test of the Second Amendment. We had the southern states who believed they were rising up, I guess, against a tyrannical government. Now, whether you believe the government was tyrannical or not is irrelevant. I do believe they believed it was. But the southern states didn't attack America. The southern states seceded and defended their domain. President Lincoln, as I've stated before, this was the first time that the will of the federal government was forced over the sovereign rights of the states. And that was a seed that created this giant monster we have now called the federal government. This is very important because as we move towards suffrage, the federal government, I believe, after the Civil War, the federal government was looking for a way to keep the Civil War from happening again. To try and keep men from rising up against what the federal government was saying. They found it in suffrage. And on top of that, I don't know who got it all started with, men being underneath the boot of women. That was the federal government's desire, and women made up the majority of the population. The federal government saw how easy it was to manipulate women to get them to do what they wanted them to do, to advance their goals. Now, as we moved forward from there, we've gotten all these laws enacted. And the one thing to understand, women, is that the more power you give to the federal government, the less power you have. And you're starting to see that come back to bite you right now with the trans movement, whatever you want to call it, insanity. But this is what you fought for, women. You fought to have men in the women's bathroom, and all they have to say is, I identify as a woman. You now have schools that anybody can go in any locker room. Your children are going to be showering. Your daughters are going to be showering with boys, and your sons are going to be showering with girls in the school locker room. And this is becoming policy. It's becoming law. That they cannot be turned away. Well, another piece in the Constitution is the Constitution clearly defines the teams. Everybody seems to get this backwards. Well, I won't say everybody, the majority of people. People think, well, it's conservatives and liberals, Democrats and Republicans, the left and the right, male and female, smokers and non-smokers. And the list goes on and on and on. But the teams that were defined in the Constitution state that it's the government and the people. Now, you feminists, think about this for a minute. The government is the opposing team. They're not doing anything to benefit you. They're doing it to benefit the government, so the government gets more and more power. So now let's think about coon hunting for a minute. What do we do with coon hunting? Well, we take our coon hounds out, we turn them loose, they get working around until they find a coon. The coon runs, he goes up the tree, and the dogs are standing down there at the bottom just bellowing away at the old coon. Ain't no way that coon's coming out of that tree. The hunter, he hears the dogs, and he comes up, and he shoots the coon. He kills him. The dogs feel that they've won. I should say the hunter has won. The only one that suffered was the coon. But the dogs are going to suffer because eventually there will be no more coons. So what do we have in this picture here? The coons are men. Feminists. You're the dogs. And the federal government's the hunter. You see, you've made yourself totally dependent upon the government, which is a dog's life. I've got a beagle. I have to open the door to let her outside, go to the bathroom. I have to feed her. I have to make sure she has water. Totally dependent upon me. The coon, the men, you see, when y'all ran with second wave feminism, I had said back then, I was a young boy, and I had said back then, I said, this isn't going to work. Men aren't going to change. So no matter how much complaining you do at men, no matter how much the dogs bark at the coon in the tree, the coon's not coming down and men aren't changing. Okay? The only changes that I see taking place in men are damaging to what women think they're trying to accomplish. Plain and simple. But who's the winner in the end? The winner in the end is the federal government, the hunter. The hunter got the coon. Some people eat them. They skin them out and they sell the pelt. But what the federal government's getting is more and more power over the population, the people. So I would hope that if this makes any kind of sense to any of you women out there that believe this philosophy of all men are evil, that you step back for a minute and think about it, and think about how this has truly affected your life. Feminism ran with, it's about choice. What you got is no more choice. You've got to go work now. You don't have a choice. So what you argued that you wanted, you didn't get. So maybe instead of continually blaming someone else, which I realize that's your nature, it's right in the Garden of Eden. When God asked Eve why she ate from the tree, she said, "The serpent beguiled me." She immediately blamed someone else, something else, for her actions. So I understand why women are blaming men for what they believe is their plight in life. But your life isn't going to get better fighting with men. Your life isn't going to get better villainizing men. You've got to figure out how to get along with men, because the teams are the government and the people. And you feminists are not the government. You're part of the people, and so are men. With that, I'm out.